Alright, for my final exam, I will be discussing the history of law, the quick and dirty version. Then we will look at the social contract theory and the meaning of that from the perspectives of Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. And subsequent to that, we will be discussing the reality of social control and the role that it plays in society. Alright, so I'll start with the history of law and the methods used to resolve dispute amongst society. So, as seen throughout history, early societies disputed with tribal fighting. So they would go at it and decide whether to compromise on a decision or have the winner take all in most cases. They believed this eye for an eye kind of mentality in these homogeneous communities. So it's kind of like a clan-based society. From there, we used trial by ordeal, where humankind versus magical spirits was tested and brought forth. This was known as giving humankind absolute power over what was accused to be magic, and so with the help or with the power granted by God, humankind had the authority to judge and condemn those they suspected as evildoers or wrongdoers. And such tactics included drowning, throwing people into snake pits to see if they would ultimately survive these ordeals. So this was kind of like a mob mentality compared to the tribal aspect. From there, we looked at trial by battle, where two or more parties duel to the death to resolve dispute. And in most cases, it was a formal challenge with consent from both sides. And from there, that went throughout history, primarily in Europe and across the world. And today it still exists between attorneys mentally battling against each other. And my last point would be the wager of law and how a potential offender has their reputation tested depending on their characteristics. Small communities where everyone knew each other would gather up and discuss how this person has lived and whether or not ultimately they are innocent or guilty. And these are all remnants of our law system today and how it works. From there, we will discuss the social contract theory, the idea of who is the stranger to me, to you, within society. To point out first, Thomas Hobbes, he had this pessimistic view of the way society works within a state of nature. That is, the origins, the very basis of the foundation of society and what makes up society. Hobbes believed you needed an absolute leader. Leviathan was his book that he wrote that focused on that. He said, ultimately, the strong will take over the weak without a leader. So it's kind of a survival of the fittest, in a sense, in a community of self-preservation. Everyone will live in fear without this absolute ruler to bring peace. kind of like Hammurabi's code. From there, in contrast, John Locke saw that every person in society have rights, the right of life, liberty, and property. We all are cooperative by nature, and a limited government would suffice our needs um, when it comes to dealing with the transgressors of society. Um, but that's all. And again, people need to consent to this way. And overall, it's a more optimistic view as compared to Hobbes, as previously stated. All right, and then my final point will be social control and the role that it plays in society throughout time and even today. So social control basically uh, is the idea of maintaining order and promoting certain behavior amongst people in communities, big and small. Ultimately, the people in charge or authoritative power want predictability. So within social control, there are two sorts. There are the formal and informal uh, motives. So we look at the formal motives. Those are the uh, president, presidents, um, precedents, excuse me, um, and rules that the government makes up to enforce order, like I had previously stated. As where the informal social control is more of the automatic norms that you build and establish at a young age. In contrast to this social control, there is deviance, and that is any act that violates a social norm. You see, deviance kind of steers the way social control works, and thus brings about social change. And this can be anything from, um, acting out or, you know, just proving your point in a rebellious sense uh, throughout the course of history. And ultimately, deviance clarifies the norms, enhances conformity, and creates a sense of value for safety. See, without deviance, there would be there would be not as much social change and not as much direction in society. These are my lessons. Thank you for listening.